I'm very happy to have today with us Spencer Rascoff, who is now the CEO and founder of Pacaso. So please put your hands together for Spencer Rascoff. Come on out, Spencer. Folks, if I could ask you guys to please be quiet so we got to keep these things going. So I really appreciate it. If you want to go outside and talk on the phone, please go outside and talk on the phone. Otherwise, I'd really appreciate your attention right now. Cool. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you, and it's great to see so many familiar faces, and hello, old friends and new friends.
Well, Spencer, you had such a huge influence on the residential tech world. Zillow was obviously a monster of a product. You went into when you first founded that company, did you go into it because you had a passion for real estate, or did you feel like there was just a really great opportunity there? Because your past company, which was a huge success as well, Hotwire, that was completely different, obviously. But then you decided to go into real estate. Was there an opportunity, or?
Yeah. So most of my startups have been about a personal problem or a personal passion. And in the case of Zillow, I had both. So in 2005, my co-founders and I were shopping for homes, and we were dismayed by the state of online real estate functionality and tools. And we started building our own mashup of MLS data, county data, and mapping information, and started sort of hacking together a minimum viable product or an MVP that would eventually become Zillow.
I'm sorry. Sure. Folks in the back, if I could just ask you guys to please stay quiet so that the folks who are sitting down, they can enjoy this talk. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
So that was the original impetus for Zillow, was to try to create something that we would want to use. And people probably don't remember this, but for the first 2 years of Zillow, there were no listings. When we started the company, we launched in 2006, they were just Zestimates. So home valuations and sold data and county data on 40 million homes on about half the country.
That's what you started with.
That's what we started with, and no listings. And it took off because it was so voyeuristic and so viral and so provocative, and people were Zillowing their childhood home and Zillowing their boss's house and Zillowing everyone on their Christmas list. And we became a top real estate site after 2 years, and then we went and started adding listings of for sale homes, rentals, reviews of real estate agents, loans, mortgages, and all the other features that you know on Zillow today.
Right. And then when you guys first started it, you obviously had your own capital because you had an exit from Hotwire. But how did you go about raising more capital for this idea, which really, the concept didn't really exist?
So the founders of Zillow were fortunate to have, this was our second rodeo. I started Hotwire in 1999, which we sold to Expedia in 2003 for $700 million. And my other co-founders that started Zillow with me were the founders of Expedia. So it was the Hotwire team and the Expedia team that came together to start Zillow. And we put $6 million of our own money into the pre-seed round to get Zillow started. Then we went and raised a $25 million venture capital round from Benchmark Capital, Technology Crossover Ventures, and others, and then another 25 and another 25. So we raised $87 million of venture capital before we went public. Today, $87 million of venture capital is not very much. That's barely a Series A nowadays. Back then, it was a lot of venture capital to raise for a pre-IPO company.
Yeah. And then, you mentioned Zestimates. Zestimates is notoriously disdained, especially by the brokerage community. You guys, I'm sure you guys were getting that feedback because it was creating comps that were off, whether they were up or down. Why keep it, and why do you think there was so much disdain from the community?
Yeah, I spent many years, and I no longer have to do this, but I spent many years trying to explain, sometimes apologize, but usually explain to the real estate industry what the Zestimate is and what the Zestimate isn't. And I would frequently say it's a Zestimate, not a Zappraisal. It is a swag, it is a starting point, it is an estimate of a home value. And if you're a great realtor, then you should use that as a jumping off point to demonstrate your expertise. And doctors do this all the time. My wife is a pediatric rheumatologist at UCLA up the street, and every time she's in an exam room with patients and their parents, they pull out their smartphone and they start Googling whatever terminology she cites to them. And she spends a lot of her time explaining to consumers, yeah, look, you see this on the internet. I know you think this, you think that, just like you think you'd understand what this house is worth. But let me tell you why I, as the doctor, am the professional and the practitioner, and I will help you interpret it. And that's what good real estate agents have gotten very adept at, is explaining to consumers why this estimate is a good starting point, but their local expertise is how they demonstrate their own value.
Was there other tools outside of Zestimates and the ability for people to search homes across the country? Because Zillow was a very rich, deep sort of a research pool, but a lot of people didn't know about a lot of the stuff that you guys had sort of layered in there.
I mean, there are a ton of features that today we sort of take for granted because they're table stakes. You see them on most other brokerage websites or other real estate portals, but reviews of real estate agents. I mean, Zillow has hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of reviews of real estate agents, which didn't used to exist on the internet. It used to be very difficult to get a sense of a real estate agent's expertise. Past sides. So every agent profile on Zillow shows their past sides and their active listings. Again, that helps buyers and sellers determine if they want to hire that real estate agent. Sold history and days on market. Believe it or not, when we started Zillow in 2006, days on market was not on the internet. Price cuts were also not on the internet. So you would see an asking price for a home, but you wouldn't see what the prior asking price was for the home. So all these are features that are very consumer friendly, but the industry, mostly NAR, didn't allow or didn't want these types of features to be available to consumers. So one by one, Zillow added them, and then over time, the industry caught up. And today, quite frankly, the feature set that Zillow has isn't all that different than what you could find on Realtor.com or Redfin or Homes.com or most other real estate portals or even brokerage websites. The differentiator today is mostly the brand. And it's that consumers love the Zillow brand. They type the word Zillow into Google more often than they type the word real estate into Google. So Zillow has kind of become synonymous with real estate for consumers. And the crowning achievement was, of course, being parodied by SNL that talked about real estate porn. And the sort of inside story, I was gone from Zillow by then, but the inside story there is that was not planned or paid for. That was completely organic. In fact, to my understanding, the Zillow team didn't even know about it ahead of time. So your brand has sort of made it when it's parodied. It's not a paid placement. It's not orchestrated by some marketing wizards back in headquarters.
And when you guys bought Trulia, at that point you were the only, really it was you guys and Zillow and Trulia. And when you guys became one entity, was there any sort of concern from regulators? Because at that point, you truly became a monopoly for listings across the country.
Well, we did not become a monopoly. So yes, there was concern from regulators. The FTC filed what's called a second request, and we spent 10 months, I spent 10 months arguing with the FTC to convince them to not sue to block the merger with Trulia. And we were ultimately successful, obviously, in convincing the FTC that it was not going to create a monopoly. And I learned a lot about antitrust law during those 10 months. And I think I was in D.C. a half dozen times. I was under oath. I was, talking with the FTC constantly. And it all comes down to the market definition. So the question before the FTC was, how do we define the market? Is it online lead generation or online real estate advertising for real estate agents? In which case, this is a lot of market share. This is a clear number one, buying a clear number two. Or is the definition all real estate related advertising, including offline advertising and direct mail and print and outbound cold calling and door knocking and all these other forms of advertising? And that's the question. If you're following the news right now, the FTC is suing Albertsons and I think it's Albertsons and Kroger's that are trying to merge. And the question again is, how do you define the market? Is it just regular grocer, or should we include Costco and Walmart and Amazon and all these other kind of Trader Joe's, all these alternative grocery stores in the market definition? So anyway, the answer is the FTC decided ultimately that the market definition allowed for the combination of Zillow and Trulia. And they were right in retrospect. I mean, Zillow Group today, which is Zillow, Trulia, and many other brands, is large, but it is not a monopoly. If real estate agents want to buy leads, they want to buy audience, They can do it on Google, they can do it on Facebook, they can do it on homes.com, they can do it on realtor.com. So it did not form a monopoly.
I mean, at that point, there was only Zillow in the game and Trulius, and then when the two became one, it sort of, like ultimately, there was only one place to go to for it.
I mean, I don't agree. There were others, but water under the bridge. The companies are merged now, and
Look, you were able to generate $3 billion in revenue from Zillow. Not an easy thing to do for tech businesses. I know a lot of people think tech can scale very fast and easily. Incredibly difficult. You would know that better than a lot of other people. And a part of that sort of changed the real estate business. Part of the ability for you to raise that kind of revenue, to generate that kind of revenue, you created the Zillow leads where people can put their names next to listings that weren't there. That weren't their listings, but you had to call them, and then they would put them in touch with the listing agent. But obviously generated tremendous tremendous revenues for you guys. It generated a new business model where people were just buying leads from Zillow, and that became its own business. So it sort of changed the business in a way. And I'm sure a lot of brokerages and firms were frustrated with you guys. How did that turn out? I mean, when they were coming to you, did they ask you to change it, or?
Well, the question of buyer's agents appearing next to other people's listings and having the lead go to the buyer's agent, it's sort of controversial in some circles, but it's the way the whole industry works. I mean, that is what IDX listings are. If you're looking at a Compass listing on coldwellbanker.com, the lead's going to go to Coldwell Banker's agent on the buy side, not to the listing agent at Compass. That's what IDX is all about. That's what MLS listing sharing is all about. So Zillow certainly didn't invent that concept of the lead going to the buyer's agent. Now you could argue that, well, hold on, that in that example, Coldwell Banker is bringing something to the party, right? It's a potluck and everyone brings something to the party. Coldwell Banker's bringing their listings and they're appearing on Compass's website. What does Zillow bring to the party? And I think that's sort of the debate. What Zillow brings to the party is 200 million visitors a month, and that's a lot of audience. And so today, and by the way, I've been gone from Zillow for 5 years, so I'm happy to argue why Zillow is great and so on and so forth, but on some level, this is not my problem anymore. But since you asked, I'm happy to answer it. Homes.com has a very different business model, as many of you know. Homes.com believes that, at least for now, that leads should go to the listing agent, not to the buyer's agent. I happen to believe that eventually they're going to realize that that's not a great business model, and they're going to end up having the leads go to buyer's agents also, and they're going to copy Realtor.com's and Zillow's business model. But that probably won't happen until a little bit down the road. Anyway, that's how Zillow's business model works. And to answer your question, there are some people that don't like it, but there are also hundreds of thousands of real estate agents that have bought a lot of buyer leads and have built huge businesses on this model, and they love it. Who's spending the $3 billion a year? It's real estate agents. The real estate agents are building their businesses by buying these leads. So there are a lot of very rabid fans of the Zillow business model who have become top agents as a result.
When you guys bought StreetEasy, in New York City, they don't have an MLS. So if you can imagine a world like that. And StreetEasy was basically their MLS. They managed to get all the major firms to put their listings on there. But they weren't doing much in revenues. They were doing about $4 million in revenues, and you guys bought them for $55 million. And a lot of people thought there's no way that Zillow is going to make they're going to make their bag back from this deal. And then StreetEasy, within a few years, started generating $400 or $500 million in revenues. Did you guys see that in advance? Did you see that in advance before you bought it?
Look, I grew up in New York, and my mom was a realtor in New York when I was a kid, and it drove me nuts when I was running Zillow when friends in New York would say, "Oh, Zillow, you guys are terrible in New York. We use StreetEasy. We love StreetEasy." So I coveted StreetEasy. I called Michael Smith, the founder and CEO of StreetEasy, every month, the first Monday of the month, every month for I think it was 3 or 4 years, to ask if he was ready to sell the company. So this was my Moby Dick, and I pursued it aggressively. And much to my delight, he eventually agreed to sell it for $50-odd million. And I knew that with the audience and the brand that they have in New York, a great business could be built there. Zillow bought 16 or maybe 17 companies in my 15 years there, my 10 or 11 years as CEO. And buying StreetEasy for $50 odd million was perhaps the best acquisition of all 17 that we did. It's an incredible brand, an incredible product, and very profitable.
And what was his argument for not selling? Because again, they were only doing $3 million, and it was very rickety sort of operation. I thought the product was great, but it was not a Zillow, and you guys were really the only buyers out there for it. So what was he holding back on?
I'm not entirely sure. I think, I've been a founder of several companies in the last 5 years. In the last 5 years, I've started 6 more companies that I'm founder and chair of. And I don't know what was in Michael's head when he rebuffed me for 3 years, but I do know from having advised lots of startups and been involved in a lot of them, a lot of the times in that early stage, you think your startup's going to go to the moon. And you believe that your thing could be worth hundreds of millions or billions or tens of billions of dollars. And so you tend to be not very amenable to those what seem like early M&A offers because you think there's so much upside. And again, I don't know what caused Michael to change his mind, but I know that's how a lot of startup founders feel.
That's enough with Zillow. Let's talk about the present. Like you said, you've started a lot of different companies. You had major exits. And by the way, do you still own any piece of Zillow? Or?
I do. I'm not on the board of Zillow anymore, but I'm still a significant shareholder.
Nice. So, but you were sort of in the game when the whole digital movement was happening. You started Hotwire in the 1990s. How has the game changed today? I mean, obviously, when you go to raise capital, it's a lot easier for you. But the startup game, how has it changed?
Well, yeah, the startups are very, very different today. The biggest difference is how much more quickly things can happen. I mean, things today happen in days that used to take months or quarters. Just the software tools that are available to startups, whether it's simple stuff like using Slack for internal communication, or Carta to manage your cap table, or AWS to stand up your cloud. I mean, in 1999, when we started Hotwire, we had racks of servers in our office and then eventually in a data center. And just as traffic grew, to spin up more servers would cost a lot of time and money. And nowadays, a startup within hours can create more instances of their cloud just by AWS, Google, or Azure. So things move much, much more quickly now, and much less capital is required to start. We spent $10 million to build the first version of Hotwire in 1999. Today, you could build that first version of Hotwire for probably $500,000.
So has that made it more difficult? I mean, obviously the vetting process is a lot, the threshold is a lot higher if you're spending $10 million versus a couple of $100,000.
Yeah, well, there are way more startups nowadays, partly because the cost of entry is so much lower, but there's also so much more venture capital today. So it's easier than ever to start a company. You can bootstrap a company now with AI tools and other software tools and get pretty far without raising any money. And so that makes it harder to succeed because it's just much more competitive. I'll take an idea that perhaps some of you in the room have, which would be an AI buyer's agent. So a website that you go to where a home buyer can interact with an AI and it can give them advice on what to bid. You enter an address and it would help you review a purchase and sale agreement. It would basically give you AI-driven advice like what a human realtor would do. That I've been pitched that idea 30 times in the last 2 months by 30 different startups. And and I'm not seeing all of them. So there are probably 100 startups out there at least pursuing that idea today. So the good news for those 100 entrepreneurs is it's easier than ever to start it and cheaper than ever. The bad news, there are 99 others doing the same thing. So I don't know, there are sort of pros and cons, I guess.
Well, you had mentioned once that the idea of a startup is to take something that's not accessible to everybody and democratize it. What sector of the real estate section do you feel like there's still opportunity for democratization?
Well, I'm trying to democratize vacation home ownership. So home ownership, we were in a home ownership crisis, a home affordability crisis, as you all know. But it is, and there are many causes of that, and there are many potential solutions to it. But Pacaso is focused on vacation home ownership. And vacation homes are even more expensive and more out of reach because their utilization is so low. and most vacation homes sit empty 80 to 90% of the time. So at Pacaso, we were trying to democratize access to second home ownership through co-ownership. Pacaso is basically NetJets for vacation homes. So we take luxury vacation homes and we fractionalize them and we sell them in eighths to a couple of people, and generally they don't know each other. And then Pacaso does the property management. We do the mortgage origination. We broker resale with a real estate agent partner, and we take care of everything. So Pacaso very much is about democratization of vacation home ownership.
Well, I own a second home, and I'm totally against owning a second home. I think financially it just doesn't make good sense.
Against owning all of its second homes. So I will argue with you that owning a part of a second home through Pacaso makes a ton of sense, and I absolutely agree with you. Owning all of a vacation home, unless you hate money, and you're totally fine with it sitting empty most of the time and paying all the bills and just sort of shrugging your shoulders, and you can afford to do that, owning a vacation home is probably not such a great idea.
How is it, there's a lot of stigma with this term, but how is this different from a timeshare?
Yeah. Well, a timeshare is basically a liability, not an asset. A timeshare is an obligation to stay at what is basically a hotel at a discounted rate forever, and there's very little liquidity on resale. It's very difficult to get out of a timeshare. Pacaso is quite different. Pacaso, you're buying real property, and the unit is single family. So these are real, regular old homes. So I own one in Malibu, for example. I own 1/8 of a Pacaso. It's about a $5 million home in Malibu. On the beach. I paid $600,000 for it, $300,000 down, $300,000 mortgage, and I own 1/8 of this $5-ish million home. I get it 6 weeks a year. If I want to resell, Pacaso sets the price with me. We ask the other owners if they want to buy it, and if they don't want to buy it, we list it in the MLS and pay commissions on resale. So Pacaso Homes actually resell. I think I mentioned to you the other day, we just issued a report that showed that of our resales so far, we've been in business for 4 years, we've had many resales, they've appreciated about 10%, and the average whole home in those same markets have appreciated about 5%. So Pacasos do twice as well as the whole homes in the same markets, and the reason for that is simple supply and demand. If you think about Malibu, there is a lot of supply of 5 million homes available for sale, but there's very little supply of 600,000 units of Pacasos, fractions of a $5 million home, so there's much less supply. And then on the demand side, there's much more demand for a $600,000 ticket price than a $5 million ticket price, because there are many more people that can buy in at that price point. It's almost like when you split the stock, all of a sudden the stock goes up, even though it really shouldn't. It's because there are just more people that can afford that lower price point for a lower price per share. So anyway, those are some of the ways that Pacaso is different than timeshare. Easier resale, real property, single family, not multifamily, and much more.
Yeah, I mean, my thinking with the second home is that even if you have a lot of freedom, you would get about 6 weeks off or 7 weeks off that you could go vacation. And ideally, you don't want to keep going back to the same places. But with this, I guess you're saying that you have the opportunity to own your 6 weeks, whatever that time is, and you get to have a $5 million home for $600,000.
And you get the appreciation of the home, unlike staying at a hotel or an Airbnb, but you also get the sense of pride of ownership. I truly feel like I own that house, and I do. I actually own a 1/8 membership interest of the LLC that owns that house, and we have owner lockers or owner closets on site, so I keep my stuff there. It feels like my house. It is my house. It's just when I close the door and leave, one of the couple other co-owners are using it instead of it sitting empty. And then when something breaks, I'm only paying 1/8 instead of 100% of the price, and Pacaso handles it. So you have the pride of ownership and the appreciation that you don't get from hotels or
And what if you wanted to do a renovation to the house? Do you get to decide that, or is there a vote?
Pacaso handles everything in that regard. So I got an email from the property manager with the other owners on BCC, because I don't know who they are, saying, hey, we're going to replace the living room rug. Here's a $2,000 living room rug with a picture. Here's a $4,000. Here's an $8,000. Different options. Vote. On something like that, majority wins. On the bigger stuff, like we had a house in Napa where a couple owners wanted to add a pickleball court. The bylaws say that has to be unanimous. I think that was $50,000 for us to put in the pickleball court. We had another house in Sonoma where we put in a hobby winery, like a 1 acre vineyard. So that had to be unanimous. Pacaso administers it, deals with it all, and you just get assessed your pro rata. So it's true, you can't hang your own art on the walls, but it turns out that's a feature, not a bug. That actually, that's a pain in the neck, especially on a second home. And the fact that we furnish it to a very high level, is beneficial, and you're only responsible for your portion.
How do you identify the properties that you're going to buy? I mean, do you already have the 8 owners that say, hey, we're interested in Aspen?
The way it works is we connect to the MLS, we're a brokerage, so we display through IDX about 2% of the listings in any city. So if you were looking in Malibu, you'd see maybe 5 or 10 listings on Pacaso, and you might see 100 listings on a brokerage website. And we're selecting the homes to display that we think would make great second homes. Based on local amenities and a bunch of AI that helps us decide which homes to display. And then we pre-aggregate demand. So once we get 4 or 5/8 kind of interest, we then approach the listing agent, we do due diligence, we put the home under contract as we are aggregating the full 8. If we don't get to full 8/8, Pacaso will sometimes buy the stub. We'll buy like 1 or 2/8 so that we can close, and then Pacaso will sell down the couple shares that we own over the ensuing couple months. So most of the inventory comes from regular old homes that are on the market that Pacaso pre-aggregates the demand and then buys.
And banks are very fickle, right? Like if it's not a home, if it's not a standalone home. In New York City, I live in a live-work building. It's impossible to get a mortgage, even though they're selling for $3,000 a foot. So, but the banks have a hard time with new concepts. How do you guys explain this?
It was a lot of work, but we figured it out. So we created our own bespoke mortgage product with banks. So on almost every one of our homes, including Cabo, London, Paris, you can actually get a mortgage. About 2/3 of our buyers have mortgages. It's usually a little bit higher than a whole home mortgage, but not much higher. And the beauty of it is if one of the other owners of the Pacaso defaults, you're not on the hook for them. That's what was tricky for us to create. By the way, that's never happened. I don't think we even had a single late payment because these are high net worth individuals. There's a good LTV, et cetera. But if it were to happen, you wouldn't be responsible for anybody else that you co-own the home with. Again, you don't even know who they are. So we created a bespoke mortgage product that works really well.
And then how many Pacaso homes are there, and how many users do you have?
We've sold about $1 billion over $1 billion, I think probably 1.2 billion or so of Pacaso homes now in about 50 markets in 5 countries. We have thousands of owners. About 40% of our sales are repeat or referral. So a very common situation would be somebody wants a second home, they live in LA and they have $1 million to spend and they start shopping for a second home in Malibu, and they quickly see $1 million doesn't get them anything in Malibu. And so instead, they'll buy an eighth of a $4 million home in Malibu and an eighth of a $4 million home in Tahoe. And now all of a sudden they've got a ski destination through Pacaso and they've got a beach destination and they've got access to 2 $4 million homes instead of one crappy $1 million home. So that's quite common where people end up buying 2.
And what is the average price of a home for Pacaso?
Our average unit is about 700,000, so times 8 is around 5 to 6 million whole home value.
We spend a lot of time obviously covering Proptech, and we see some incredible ideas and concepts that are being pitched to us constantly, and people are like, write about our technology. And we see some incredible stuff. And unfortunately, even if the product is really good, you see a lot of these places fail because they're just not able to get traction. Even though you can go to the firms or to the companies or to the users and consumers and say, you can actually save money using this, adoption tends to be incredibly hard. You obviously haven't had too much problem with your past companies, but what do you think the solution for that is?
Well, real estate's a hard category to crack because of the infrequency. So people buy homes every 7 years. It is much easier to do a startup where it's a behavior that people do every month, like booking a restaurant reservation or buying an airline ticket that they do maybe every 2 or 3 months. So the infrequency is very difficult. That increases what they call CAC, the customer acquisition cost of these types of companies. And then on the B2B side, so startups that cater to the industry, it's very difficult because the industry is so fragmented. People come in and out. It can be difficult to get people to adopt new technologies. So it's hard on the consumer side. It's hard on the B2B side. The companies that have pulled it off are ones that have come up with something that's really awesome, and either consumers love and the word of mouth lowers the CAC. So that's true of Pacaso. I mean, as I said, 40% of our sales are repeat or referral. So people who own Pacasos have friends over and they love it, and it kind of sells itself to their friends, and that lowers our CAC. And then on the B2B side, Companies like Loop, for example, which Zillow acquired, is a good example of B2B software that grew with a low CAC through a combination of a partnership with Keller Williams, which helped drive adoption through the Keller Williams universe, plus virality through network effects. So the Loop software is all about agents inviting other agents into a deal room to work on a transaction together, and so it had natural virality. So that's an example of a B2B product that cracked this CAC issue.
What's a good example of a sort of a Proptech that you see there's opportunity for right now? Outside of Pacaso, obviously, you get a lot of people who pitch you, and you've seen a lot of companies come and go. But what is an example of a good one that you see today?
I mean, I guess I'll talk my book, but I'm an investor in a company called Arrived Homes, for example, which is a Seattle company. They've raised, I don't remember how much venture capital, maybe $10 plus million. By the way, just to size this, Pacaso, I don't think I mentioned, Pacaso has raised $220 million of venture capital. Remember I said Zillow had raised $87 million of venture capital prior to its IPO. So Pacaso's raised $220 million. But anyway, Arrived Homes lets individual people, retail investors, people like you and me, buy into rental properties. So what they're doing is they're trying to democratize access to investing in real estate. Like, we all know investing in real estate is terrific, but the ticket price is very high. You have to buy a home or buy a building, and the complexity is very high. Once you buy that home, you have to figure out how to rent it out, or you buy a building, you have to rent it out. Like, that's hard. So what they've done is they've fractionalized real estate investing. And there are a number of other companies doing things like this, Realty Mogul, Roofstock, and others, but Arrived is one in particular that I like a lot. And I'm an investor in the company, and I also have bought into a number of their properties as a real estate investor too.
You know, from 2016 to 2019, there was more money that went into Proptech than any other industry. So just imagine, more than biotech or anything else. Investors felt like there were so many fixes for real estate that they poured a ton of money into it. And then COVID happened, and a lot of these companies, founders are not always business people. And then when you have headwinds like COVID, it was very hard for these folks to manage through it, even though there were some really great products out there. And I was meeting with a major investor yesterday, and he finds a tremendous amount of opportunity here, where he's identifying really strong products that just haven't become a business yet. Are you seeing the same opportunities for your fund?
Well, yeah. I mean, when interest rates went up, when mortgage rates went up, venture capital wrote off Proptech. I mean, it is a VC desert out there for Proptech startups right now. Like, very, very difficult, almost impossible to raise for a Proptech startup, which is weird because it's 18% of GDP. There's 1.4 trillion of residential real estate transactions, 100 billion of realtor commissions. Like, it's a huge industry, and mortgage rates are not going to be 7% forever. And even in bad years, 4 million homes still sell. But VCs are like, very guardrail to guardrail. They're sort of a dog with a bone. And now it's AI, and real estate is left for dead. So there are absolutely a lot of great opportunities if you have a bunch of money sitting around. Most of these venture capital firms, the Proptech specific ones, don't have a lot of money because where do they get the money from? They get the money from their limited partners, the endowments and high net worth individuals and others that give them the money to invest, and they're not putting money into Proptech funds. And the generalist funds are allocating their money towards AI things, not Proptech. So there is a lot of opportunity, but there's also not very much demand because there's just not a lot of capital available to Proptech startups.
But so when you get a lot of people to pitch you ideas, and how do you identify the ones that you want to work with? I mean, how much of it is the individual? How much of it is the product? And how do you decide, like, here's one that we're going to invest in? At
the very early stage, the pre-seed stage, the idea stage, or maybe you've got something small built, it's mostly about the team. You're mostly betting on the founder. Why? Because everything's going to change. The original idea will probably change. The name of the company might change. The go-to-market might change. Everything's going to change. So all you can really bet on at that point is the founder. And the key thing I'm looking for at that stage is what we call founder product fit. So that is all about whether the founder is obsessed with fixing that problem and whether they have some differentiation, some advantage to solve that problem. So Pacaso, for example, my co-founder there, is obsessed with second home ownership. He built Loop, which he sold to Zillow. He worked for me for 4 years at Zillow. He understands digital real estate transactions better than anyone and brand building. and he cares deeply about solving this problem. He's the perfect person. He was put on earth to create this company. If I said to him, Austin, go create this other thing, this other company doing something totally different, he would be terrible at that, but he's awesome at creating Pacaso. So there's no such thing as a good founder. There's only a good founder for a specific idea, and at the very early stage, that's what you're looking for. Just a quick story on another startup, not a Proptech startup, but there was another startup that I started. And I said to that co-founder who was starting the company with me, I said, what would you say if I told you you couldn't do this idea? For whatever reason, you could not pursue this. And he just looked at me, he's like, Spencer, I wake up every morning obsessing about this problem. I go to sleep every night obsessing about this problem. This is all I care about. I would do this for free. This is what I'm going to do with my life, is just work on this. And I was like, okay, I want you for this thing. So that's what you're looking for at the early stage.
And what motivates you at this point? Like we said, you had a couple of amazing exits. You don't really have to work. But what is motivating you to try all these new things and be so active in the market?
I'm motivated by mentoring and advising and coaching. I played on the field for 20 years at startups, and I'm proud of my win-loss record there and the championships that I won. But it is exhausting and all-consuming to play at a high level on the field. And I'm now at the stage of my career where I'm on the sideline coaching. And I'm coaching on a couple different fields simultaneously. And I really enjoy that. I really like finding younger entrepreneurs that with what I've learned and my counsel, I can hopefully make them better at their jobs and be more successful. So that's what motivates me right now, is mentoring and coaching.
And then when you invest in a company, do you sort of place yourself on their board? How do you make sure that mentorship continues and your investment is safe?
I have 6 companies that I'm founder and chair of right now, including Pacaso and a couple others. 3 of those 6 are former Zillow teams that sort of followed me from Zillow to start these new companies. 3 of them are not Zillow teams. And then I'm an investor in about 70 other companies. About a quarter of those 70 are in Proptech. So I'm involved in 25 or so Proptech companies. And I have different levels of involvement. So the ones that I'm the founder and chair of, I'm super involved. I'm in their Slack. I'm talking to them all day long, 24/7. I'm, in product reviews. I'm talking to them constantly. All the way at the other end of the spectrum, there are some of those 70 that I hardly ever talk to, and like everywhere in between.
And obviously, you're starting these companies because you feel like you could fix something. But are you obsessed with fixing these things for the second home? And I don't know what the other 5 companies do, but
yeah.
Are you motivated if if CoStar shows up and says, "Hey, we want to buy this for $1 billion"? Are you ready to go? Or
well, I would certainly take that call. Yeah, the answer is yes. I'm obsessed with solving at least the 6 problems that I'm solving for in the startups that I've started. M&A is an interesting thing. I would absolutely entertain offers to sell those companies, but only if I thought the acquirer would help make us more likely to solve that problem. And so, for example, just use Dotloop as an example. I remember when I was talking to Austin, when I was CEO of Zillow, he was CEO of Dotloop, and I was trying to buy Dotloop, and he said to me, he's like, I'm obsessed with the problem of real estate transactions going digital. I just want every real estate transaction to be digital instead of offline with pen and paper. And I said, well, if you're part of Zillow, we'll be more likely to achieve that mission together because we'll embed Dotloop in the Premier Agent app. We'll lower the price because we can subsidize pricing by selling more advertising. We can attach our brand to it, so on and so forth. And that convinced him, that and the $100-something million that we paid for the company convinced him to sell the company to Zillow because it would help him achieve the mission. I'm positive that if we had offered the same amount of money, but he didn't think that we were going to help him achieve the mission, he would have turned it down.
In the 90s, real estate was sort of a slow-growing asset. Like it grew at 2%, 4% per year. And then it became a hot item in the 2000s, and it became a really hot item. In fact, so hot that people were leaving their jobs as lawyers and doctors to become real estate agents. Finance people were going into development. And it sort of had its heyday, the first 20 years of the aught years. And then I feel like regulators and policymakers sort of saw this industry that was making a lot of money, and they thought, hey, maybe it's time we start taxing these guys. And they started coming up with these sort of the luxury tax that you have in LA, the rent ruling that you had in New York, and other sort of rulings that have like sort of stunted real estate's growth, which in some cases I find discriminatory. I mean, especially the sort of the luxury tax that you have in Los Angeles. And now you had the ruling that happened, the NAR ruling that's happened. Do you feel like we're sort of in the August of this boom of real estate right now?
When I parked my car just on the way here, the guy said to me, the car park guy said, "Are you going to the Real Deal conference?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "What do you think about real estate? Do you think I should become a realtor?" So there's still a lot of interest, at least from one guy outside. I mean, look, it's a big industry. It's a little bit like healthcare. I mean, real estate and healthcare are kind of neck and neck as a percent of GDP, and so they're both in the spotlight from regulators and taxing authorities and others. I think housing, in some ways, is even more in the spotlight because owning a home is such an important part of the American dream historically, and it has become out of reach for most people. And so there are a lot of boogeymen in the industry that legislators and regulators can point to, whether it's the private equity firms that are buying up all the homes, or the mortgage lenders that are cheating, or mortgage servicers that are cheating their borrowers, or the real estate agents that are charging too much in commission, et cetera. Obviously, I, like you, would rather them focus on lessening regulation so we can build more homes. I mean, that's what will actually help housing affordability, is more supply, or helping improve affordability in other ways. And obviously rates are on their way down, which is great, but they've been high for quite a while, and that's been hard. With respect to the commission question, I think commissions are already coming down a hair, because people are negotiating more than ever before. I hear this all the time, where friends of mine who know that I'm involved in Proptech will say, "Oh, I heard the government said commissions are lower now, so I'm going to ask my agent for a lower commission." I'm like, "Well, it's a lot more complicated than that, but good luck." And now agents are having to get good at tap dancing through that conversation. Many of them will be great at it and will be able to keep commissions where they're at. Some of them will not be as good at it, and commissions will come down a little bit. The early data is that already commissions are down 10 to 20 basis points. So going into all this, we were at 5.4%, between 5.2 and 5.4%, split between buy side and sell side, and 90% of buyers used an agent. And I have no idea where it's going to shake out. I would guess that it'll be not in the low fives, but in the low fours, maybe 4.2, not 5.2 to 5.4, kind of in the low fours overall, which is a pretty big contraction on commission rates. And that some buyers will not use an agent; they'll be unrepresented. But many buyers will still use a buyer's agent, but commissions will come down. That's where I guess we'll end up. But there are some that are even more bearish than that think that, I was talking to one expert this morning, he thinks it's going to end up at 3.5%. Between buy side and sell side, about 2% on the sell side and about 1 to 1.5 on the buy side. And he's got lots of data and computer models and whatever to justify that prediction. That's one of the most bearish predictions that I've seen. I'm not quite there, but nobody thinks they're going up.
Do you think it's going to shake out the brokerage community in general? Do you think there's going to be less brokers? I mean, obviously, you only have about 15% of the agents who have exclusive listings. Those people are able to make a decent living the way they have. But a large part of that community was counting on that buyer's commission.
I do think that we'll have fewer realtors as a result. And this is a continuation of a long trend of more and more market share aggregating to the top agents and teams. This has been something that has been happening for 10 or more years, and Zillow contributed to that, because the way Zillow sells leads to top, what they call flex teams through the Premier Agent product, does sort of king make. In the old world, Zillow used to sell leads to, say, 100 or 200 or 300 agents in a zip code. Now, most of their zip codes, they're just selecting the top 3 to 5 teams and sending all the leads to those couple teams, because those teams have the highest lead conversion. So the rich are getting richer, in our marketplace, and yes, absolutely, reduced commission percentages are going to be harder on the mid-tier. I don't think it's going to be as hard on the bottom tier. The people that do 1 or 2 deals a year for friends or family, I think they probably keep their license and they keep doing 1 or 2 deals for friends and family, albeit at lower commission. But it's the people that were doing 3 to 5 deals a year that were kind of just barely making it, and not 3 to 5 deals in Beverly Hills, but 3 to 5 deals in a median priced zip codes. I think they're the ones that are going to say, hold on, is this really worth it? Maybe I should look for another career. Actually, a quick thing. I heard a data point this morning, secondhand, so I can't prove this, but somebody told me that they were talking to somebody that runs a real estate licensing training business, so where real estate agents pay to learn how to take the real estate test, and their numbers are down 25% in the last couple months. So despite the ballet Parker, I guess, there are a lot of people out there that are saying, hold on, wait a minute, maybe I don't want to become a realtor after all, because commissions are going down.
You understand real estate and you understand the tech side. Is there a chance, is there a possibility for tech to solve the housing crisis? Because obviously you need a lot more homes in this country. You need it in the cities. Is there a tech solution to this?
I mean, the possible tech solution is something around ADUs, and because I believe it's entirely about supply. Not entirely, but it's mostly about supply. And here in California, as you all know, they've loosened all the restrictions on adding ADUs, but still hardly anybody has done so. And so there are a lot of startups that are trying to, I've been pitched, at least 20 times, a map overlay where you can see which homes you could add ADUs, or you enter an address and it says, here's the automated valuation model today, and here's what an ADU could add to it. So it's possible that if ADUs get easier for investors and buyers to learn where they can be added, or homeowners to learn where they can be added, and the cost of dropping ADUs there keeps coming down because of technology, I think that could have a meaningful impact.
In 2021, you were a big, proponent of SPACs. Do you still feel strongly about them?
The SPAC product as it exists today is totally broken and dead, and the government killed it, and other market forces. So when I was promoting it, it was a good product because it was a faster way to get public at lower cost. But it no longer is that. There are still SPACs today, for sure, but I would not recommend to a friend that they take their company public through a SPAC today. It's not the same product that it was 3 years ago.
What's changed about it? The concept is the same. Right?
Yeah, there are two big changes, and without getting too technical and in the weeds, the single biggest change is the ability to offer projections at the time of the SPAC merger. You used to be able to do that, and you can't do that anymore. The second biggest issue is the amount of time that the government is taking. They're basically intentionally dragging their feet on approving SPAC mergers, so it's no longer faster. And then the third is you used to be able to raise money from investors in what's called a PIPE, a private investment in a public equity, at the same time as the SPAC merger, and that's basically shut. Not for regulatory reasons, that's shut because investors are just no longer want to do that. So for all those reasons, it's no longer a good way to take your company public.
Well, let's talk about some personal stuff. You grew up in New York City, but you choose to live in Los Angeles. What does Los Angeles have that New York doesn't? Actually, that's not a great question. But why did you choose Los Angeles over New York?
Yeah, so my parents actually moved us here when I was 12, and Linda May, who's here somewhere, sold my parents their house, which was just 3 blocks away. So I grew up in Beverly Hills for high school, but in New York as a little kid. Both cities are great. I've lived in both back and forth many times. I choose to live in LA, and 75 and Sunny Ventures is the name of my venture firm. I love LA. I think LA has diversity. It's a real city, but it has a high quality of life. I love the ocean. I try to see the ocean at least 100 days a year. Can't really do that in New York. So I don't know. There are a lot of great things about both places, but for me, LA is where it's at.
And lastly, we probably shouldn't close with this, but I'm really curious about this. Your father was the manager for David Bowie and Rolling Stones and U2. Did you get to hang out with those guys? Did you go to shows?
Yeah.
Or?
So he was the business manager and the tour producer. So he produced tours for U2, the Stones, David Bowie, Paul Simon, Pink Floyd, Leonard Skinner, 38 Special, Shakira, like everybody. And Elvis Presley, and yes, I went to all their shows. And I've been to hundreds and hundreds of Rolling Stones and U2 shows. I'm hard of hearing as a result, so that's the downside because I spent my whole childhood going to concerts. But it was a really exciting, interesting way to grow up. And most summers we would tour with one of those bands, either Rolling Stones or U2. And I will say, though, that as an entrepreneur, I got a lot out of it because the business nerd in me will say that I watched my dad pivot his business many, many times over his career. As music shifted formats from 8 tracks to tapes to CDs to streaming, that had huge implications for his business because a lot of his business was around what was called royalty audits, which we don't have to get into right now, but that business changed. Then touring became bigger. Then my dad basically invented what's called 360 touring, which is where an investor buys the tour. And this is how tours work today. Live Nation or somebody else will pay Taylor Swift or U2 hundreds of millions of dollars and basically buy the tour outright.
He came up with that concept.
He and his partners in 1989 with the Rolling Stones, yeah. And that's how touring works today. And then the residency concept that we're used to today. So when U2 is at the Sphere in Las Vegas for 30 days in a row, or Billy Joel is at Madison Square Garden for 60 days, et cetera, that concept of residency, Elvis sort of started it in Las Vegas, but it wasn't until Simon and Garfunkel in 1989 or 1990 did that at the Paramount Theater, which my dad produced for 30 days in a row, which was really unheard of at the time, and now that's very normal. And then the last innovation was the securitization. So Bowie bonds were David Bowie's method of securitizing his future stream of cash flows from his music publishing, and he got paid a lump sum for that future stream of cash flows, and my dad and his partner invented that. And today that's super common. I mean, most people, you see it all the time where people sell their catalog. Jimmy Buffett sold his catalog, and many artists sell their catalog today either outright or through securitization, and he helped create that. So yeah, it was fun going to a lot of concerts, and I have a lot of memorabilia at my house, but it was also fun watching an entrepreneur pivot his career as his industry changed over his almost 40-year career. You can Google Joe Rascoff obituary, and you can read about all this in the New York Times.
Did he see your success?
He did. He saw my success. He passed away about 5 or 6 years ago, so he saw, he was very proud of me, and he saw a lot of my success.
Spencer, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
This was wonderful. Thanks for being here. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely.